Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, original link to the video, top of the description. Below that link to Discord. Would love to have you. General Knowledge, great channel. I watched the videos of theirs recently. I actually got a good amount of views on that, so thank you guys for being interested in that. No, we're doing what we call countries versus what they call themselves. Like I know Deutschland, right? Like we call them Germany, they say Deutschland. For any other examples that I know? I don't. Oh, Spain, España. I don't think Mexico and Mexico counts because it's named the same thing. It's just pronunciation. So yeah, let's find out. My name's Connor. If you're new, did I say this stuff? Original link. If you're tired of me talking and pausing like this, just watch the original video. I'd recommend you watching it anyway. I've stalled enough. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's learn.
Names, more specifically country names. Every country is called something other than its flag or national anthem. It's the main way to identify a nation, by what we call it. But countries aren't called the same.
Oh, India too. I think there could be a change soon to actually change it to like Nepat or like Nerat or like Yijat.
Thing everywhere, and sometimes they vary with language. What I'm talking about is the difference between an exonym and an endonym. An endonym, I'm guessing. The Greek endon, meaning inner, and onoma, meaning name,
so
is a native name for a geographical place, meaning that it is used inside that place by its people, while an exonym, from the Greek exo, meaning outer, and onoma, also meaning name, is a non-native name for that same place, meaning that it is only used outside of it by people that don't live there.
What does endemic mean? Does that have a connection? Like, doesn't endemic mean like
Each country has at least one endonym. It has to call itself something, but it can have various exonyms throughout the world. For instance, Deutschland is the endonym for the country that is also known by the exonym Germany in English and Allemagne in French. Exonyms aren't just translations of the native name into another language. While they can be that, they can also be fully different names that a particular people of the world have for that nation. The reason for the difference between the endonyms and the various exonyms are usually one of three. It can be derived from a different root, as
like Deutschland meaning like land of the Germans, rather than German like Britannia, land of the Britons, or Francia.
As is the case with Germany and Deutschland. They can be equivalent words, only different in pronunciation or orthography. Ethiopia is an example of this, with the endonym being Ethiopia, and those that are fully or partially translated from the native language because of an inability of pronouncing the native endonym. So now that we've become aware that this is a reality, countries being known differently throughout the world, and now that we've understood what endonyms and exonyms are, plus the difference between them, let's look at a few examples of these differences throughout the world, learning which countries are known by different names, why that is, and what they mean. There's a really cool website that summarizes this whole topic, endonymmap.com. All credit to them for going through the effort of making this. In it, we can take a look at this really cool map, which identifies each country with the name it calls itself.
I freaking love Arabic writing. It looks so cool.
Its endonym. However, some are not understandable to someone from Europe or America unless you happen to speak Arabic, Russian, or some of the many Asian languages, which brings about another interesting aspect of this topic. Which languages are used for countries' endonyms? Most countries have their own language, and so their name for themselves is written in that language, like Turkey using Turkish or Portugal using Portuguese. But going from Portugal's example, Portuguese is also used as the endonym language in many other countries worldwide, a consequence of their colonialism, and this happens as well mostly with English, French, and Spanish. Portuguese is used in the for themselves is written in that language, like
Endonym, the country says itself, is exo, other countries call.
Turkey using Turkish or Portugal using Portuguese. But going from Portugal's example, Portuguese is also used as the endonym language in many other countries worldwide, a consequence of their colonialism. And this happens as well, mostly with English, French, and Spanish. Portuguese is used in the endonyms of 8 countries, Spanish by 20 countries, mostly in America, French by 24 countries / territories worldwide. Some in this count include French overseas territories, and English is used in the endonyms of 60 countries or territories worldwide.
So he's saying that the likelihood of a country using the endonym word name for other countries is directly connected to, in essence, how familiar they are and how much history they are in shared language, and just that makes complete sense.
By far the most used language. And then there are also other examples of languages used in not many but more than one country endonym, such as Romanian, used by Romanian and Moldova, and Russian, used by Russia, Belarus, and Transnistria. But like I mentioned, this map is in the native languages, in most cases becoming ununderstandable when
Where's Transnistria? Okay, Moldovan.
you don't know every language in the world, in most cases becoming ununderstandable when you don't know every language in the world. So in addition, I found this other map made by Reddit user Crimea Hat, which takes countries' endonyms and then directly translates them into English, which is a good exercise because it allows us to understand, as I mentioned earlier, that exonyms, the names we call countries, aren't always just a direct translation of their endonyms. Egypt's endonym is this in Arabic, and in English it's Egypt, but if you directly translate its endonym to English,
I'm slow.
Translation of their endonyms. Egypt's endonym is
Egypt's endonym, meaning the name that Egypt calls itself.
this in Arabic.
Okay, so Egypt is an exonym. They don't call themselves Egypt.
And in English, it's Egypt. But if you directly translate its endonym to English, it is Misr. Misr is an Arabic name simply meaning country, while Egypt comes from the Greek Aegyptos, which was the Greek pronunciation of the ancient Egyptian name Wutkapta, mention of the spirit Ptah. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things in this video.
Guys, just please fast forward. I need to just press the right arrow button a few times to when I get back to the part, because
endonyms. Egypt's endonym is this.
Egypt's endonym. So this is what Egypt calls itself.
And in English, it's Egypt. But if you direct endonym is this in Arabic, and in English, it's Egypt.
Okay, he's confusing me with his language because this is the endonym in Arabic of, so this is what the people from that we use the term Egypt are calling themselves.
But if you directly translate them is this in Arabic, and in English it's Egypt.
Okay, so is he saying, like, repeating that this is what Egypt calls itself, like in Arabic, this is Egypt, but then he says,
but if you directly endonym is this in Arabic, and in English it's Egypt.
So he's saying this, but is he restating, or is he stating that that this means? No, I think I get what he means. Okay.
But if you directly translate its endonym to English, it is Misr. Misr is an Arabic name simply meaning country, while
okay, I freaking get it.
Egypt comes from the Greek Aegyptos, which was the Greek pronunciation of the ancient Egyptian name Woodkapta, mansion of the spirit Ptah. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things in this video.
Okay, I understand now. Egypt is the exonym used in English to describe the place of what we call Egypt, which is Egypt, and Egyptians and other Arabics call Egypt this, which, if you translate to English, it's or you put it in regular or like regular writing, like Latin writing or whatever, Latin alphabet means is miser, which means country. So the meaning of the exonym of the endonym for what the people from Egypt call their country but the English called it Egypt because of the Greek Aegyptos, mansion of the spirit of Ptah. So English got their name for this area completely separate from how that area called itself, which is in English just country. So, okay, so is he saying that it would be more correct for us to call Egypt Misr or country? Okay. That was important for me. Okay, I know it might have been annoying, but now I can continue with confidence.
Ptah, mention of the spirit Ptiation, meaning country, endonym to English, it is Misr. Misr is an Arabic name simply meaning country, while Egypt comes from the Greek Aegyptos, which was the Greek pronunciation of the ancient Egyptian name Woodkapta, mansion of the spirit Ptah. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things in this video. The Greek...
Okay, so again, the ancient from the Greeks saw this Hukakpa, mansion of the spirit path of the spirit Ptah, and said, okay, that seems to sound out to Egyptos to me. Okay, we'll say that, and then English is like, okay, Egypt.
Mention of the spirit Ptah. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things in this video. The Greek exonym for Egypt at the time was just a direct translation of its endonym, but while the endonym changed in the meantime, the exonym remained the same. Most of the countries whose endonym language is a Latin language are essentially the same in other Latin exonyms, being just a literal translation. When or remained the same. Most of the countries whose endonym language is a Latin language are essentially the same in other Latin exonyms, being just a literal translation. One example is the Caribbean island shared between France and the Netherlands, Saint-Martin, Sint-Maarten. As we see in this map, the direct translation of endonyms is essentially the same throughout America as the exonyms in English are. But as we get to Europe, this changes, despite all the nations using Latin scripts. Finland's endonym is Suomi, Ireland's is Eide, Switzerland is Helvetia, Greece Hellas, and Albania Shqipëria, as well as the first example we gave of Germany being Deutschland. Oh, and Hungary, whose endonym is Magyarország. Germany comes from Germania, land of the Germani, an ancient tribe of the area named by Julius Caesar, while Deutschland comes from the Old High German Diustik, which means of the people, essentially land of the people. Finland equals land of the Finns, while Suomi just means land. Helvetia refers to an ancient local tribe, while Switzerland means land of the Swiss. Greece was the Roman Latin ancient local tribe, while Suomi just means land. Helvetia refers to an ancient local tribe, while Switzerland means land of the Swiss.
What's this in context of? Helvetia? Are you saying that local Swiss people call themselves Helvetia?
Greece was the Roman Latin name for Hellas, the Greek name of the territory. Shqipëria is derived from the word shqiptoi, meaning to speak intelligibly, I think, while Albania is the medieval Latin name of the country, which may be derived from the Illyrian tribe of the Albani. Armenia's is Ayastan, and Georgia, Sakartvelo. Georgia after St. George, or some people say it has another Russian origin, and Sakartvelo is the native term for land of the Kartvelians, which I imagine were a local people. In Africa, the direct translation of endonyms mostly corresponds to the English exonyms due to the colonization of European powers, which I imagine were a local people. In Africa, the direct translation of endonyms mostly corresponds to the English exonyms due to the colonization of European powers of these countries. The only exception seemed to be Egypt, as we already saw. Algeria is Al-Jazair.
I feel like that's the case, likely because a lot of the nations in Africa, I guess you can count Egypt aside, mainly like lower Saharan, sub-Saharan, were created very recently and not very so the people in this area didn't have a long history of being together in this area and are less likely to have a historical name for an endonym, and so that makes sense what he said.
The exception seemed to be Egypt, as we already saw. Algeria is Al-Jazair, a similar word to Algeria but in the original Arabic. Morocco is Maghrib, an Arabic term literally meaning place of the setting of the sun.
Maghreb? That's a capital somewhere.
While the Latin word Morocco...
That's crazy! Japan, place of the rising sun. Morocco, place of the setting sun. And which makes complete sense. That's awesome because discount North and South America, they're giant ocean away, and obviously, giant Pacific, the great continent of the old world, where obviously Japan is going to be the first country in the morning, major country, to see the sun coming. It's gonna rise there before anyone else, for everywhere else. And then Morocco on the far western coast of Africa is going to be like one of the last countries that sees it sets. Not counting, again, North and South America, but, makes sense. That's cool.
Comes from the capital of Marrakesh. It's interesting because Maghreb in some European countries is used to describe an entire region in addition to Morocco, and
it's a capital, isn't it?
Not just the country. Also, as we'll see ahead,
Zagreb.
Japan's endonym means land of the rising sun. It's interesting that Morocco's endonym is precisely the opposite.
Right. Thank you, and it makes sense.
All other African nations seem to have their endonyms being the same as their exonyms in English, the only difference being in the spelling and pronunciation being done in the native languages. In Asia, most are also just native versions of the English exonyms, with the exceptions of China, whose endonym is Zhongguo, meaning the central state in the native language, while China seems to come from the Persian word for the region. Bhutan's native name is Drukyul, which literally means country of the Drukpalig lineage, or the land of the thunder dragon.
That's badass. And that name, Drukyul, that sounds like something like Tolkien would have given to like some orc commander. Drukyul. Drukyul. Why am I doing it in a Russian? Of the Drukpa. That's such a powerful sound, that druk. 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 R is like such a menacing sound. Murder. Slaughter.
A much cooler name, honestly. North Korea is called Choson, which apparently literally means North Korea in the local language, while South Korea calls itself Anguk, the Great Han Republic. Japan, as I mentioned earlier,
Han, like the ethnic East Asian group dominating China,
is internally called Nihon, the Great Han Republic. Japan, as I mentioned earlier, is internally called Nihon, meaning origin of the sun. And India is Bharat, which originates from the Sanskrit word Bharata, which stands for Agni, meaning fire, while India comes from the name of the river Sindhu that has been used in Greek since the 5th century BC. It becomes further evident that many of the current English exonyms come from ancient Greek, perhaps due to the fact that many ancient maps were made by the Greeks, and place names in these maps were of course chosen by them.
I love the evolution of maps. I love how they seem to like this is all super good. When was this made? This is
by the Greeks come from ancient Greek, perhaps due to the fact that many ancient maps were made by the Greeks.
This is made by the ancient Greeks? Don't tell me that. That's impossible. How did they get it so good? And interesting how I mean, there's no way they found a landmass here. So I'm assuming I'm curious why they fill in the unknown with land rather than just water. But the Arabian Peninsula is pretty darn good. Obviously, the Mediterranean is very well done. That's where Greek is, and there's been a lot of advanced civilizations around here. I'm surprised by how good Great Britain, Denmark. What is that? The tip of Sweden, or is that Gotland? Ireland, Spain, a bit strange, but still good. And they seem to get the width of Europe pretty accurately. Not so much here, but like up here. What is this? Oh, those are the Maldives. Huh. Saudi Arabia. So this has got to be India. I don't know why they thought that there was a strait. And then I'm assuming this is the, Thailand up to Singapore. Super crazy good.
And place names in these maps were of course chosen by them. In Oceania, there don't seem to be any major differences between endonyms and exonyms in English, with them being the same, at times translated to the local language. New Zealand is identified as Aotearoa, which is the native name for New Zealand by the native Maori people. One literal translation seems to be long white cloud or long canoe, while New Zealand might come from the Dutch province of Zeeland. If you notice any mistakes in what I'm saying, please let me know in the comments. Sometimes I might have the wrong information. So in summary, when we directly translated endonyms into English, there are very few countries throughout the world with endonyms that have different meanings than their English exonyms, with most of them just being direct translations with just small changes in spelling and pronunciation. From my
Brazil, like S to a Z, but super close. Mexico, Mexico. That can't, same spelling, slightly, X, X and H. But yeah, and obviously, so let's finish.
A rough count through this map, there are only about 17 countries worldwide whose endonyms are fully different words than their English exonyms, and not just a translation or adaptation. There are also cases of countries who have requested other countries to stop using exonyms when referring to them, using the native name in the local language. Two examples of this are Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah, but I don't have these things on my keyboard. I don't the thingy.
in Africa, which has requested countries use the French name instead of always translating the words into other languages, creating names like Ivory Coast or Costa do Marfim. Cabo Verde did the same, asking for the Portuguese endonym to be used instead of its exonyms, such as Cape Verde. And examples of countries which had endonyms that were a consequence of European colonization and then chose to change them, effectively changing the name of their countries. For instance, in 1972, the government of then Ceylon, which is the anglicized form of the Portuguese Ceylon, changed the name to Sri Lanka. And
that's interesting. So like endonyms can still be, so like an endonym can be an exonym, like they can be both. Like if the people in a country refer to their country as the same name that other countries called them. Interesting.
Swaziland changed its name to Eswatini, the same meaning, land of the Swazis.
What about like the Czech Republic, Czechia, I guess that's it.
But in native language. So those are the names we call countries versus the names they call themselves. Understanding what endonyms and exonyms are, the internal names of countries, and the names other countries call those same places respectively. And learning that exonyms aren't always direct translations of endonyms into another language, but whole other names altogether, varying in their origin. Although it's important to note that the comparison we did between endonyms and exonyms in this video was made using the direct translation of them into English. The cases we saw here might not be common to all other languages and their exonyms for nations throughout the world. Having a video which listed out and compared all the exonyms and endonyms that each country has for all the countries worldwide would not only be too long, but also I think too dense and specific to be interesting. Although there are some specific interesting cases, like Norway being the only European country that refers to Greece by Elas. So if you have any interesting information about how a specific country calls another, let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.
Channel's awesome. He's great. So big things that I learned is that obviously other than what exonym and endonym mean, is that there are many countries that have many countries that were shaped not sort of by themselves, but carved out through like colonial powers, and now are within borders with people that they never really identified with in the first place, or so a lot of places where it seems like people other than the country itself who chose borders tend to keep some name given them by outside. So essentially using their endonym or having the same endonym and exonym. A lot of them seem to come from like for the instance of Europe, or like Middle East areas, referring to like what people in the much further in the past, like what the Romans called people. They'd be like, okay, well, let's call that place that or something. And then obviously the ones that just didn't have as much influence and just had clear endonyms. Really cool video. I love how it shows deserts too. Is there not a single desert in Europe? Spain is pretty arid, right? Especially towards the south. But American Southwest, northern Mexico, obviously Sahara. Boom. So you could go from like this part of China into Mongolia, all the way through the stands, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean coast, and just be in a desert, arid climate the whole time. I also heard a great video, guys. I hope you're all doing well. Love y'all. I paused a lot. Sorry about that. But I also heard that, like, you'd think if I said like what area of the world or what forest produces the most oxygen, probably think, oh, Amazon rainforest. It's got to be biggest one. incorrect. I heard that technically, Alaska, Canada, like the Scandinavian countries, Russia, all of Russia, Siberia, all of here, are all kind of considered the taiga or burial. Anyways, the answer was this one over here. But love y'all. See you guys next time. Bye, guys.